Translator, Hand of Vecna Editor, 2 more free thoughts. Dina level, 1000 race, half-elf CLA.S.SES, Acolyte 200 Priest 200 Ranger 100 Strider 100 Mage 200 Sorcerer 200 HP, 35,000 SP, 16,000 STR, Strength 1750 Dex, Dexterity 3000 VIT, Vitality 2050 Int, Intelligence 11,550, plus 2000, AGI, Agility 3700 MND, Mind 8902 Luck, Luck 1930 Equipment Head, Right Arm, Sage's Bracelet, Int plus 1000, Left Arm, Spy's Bracelet, Int plus 1000, Body, Traveler's Clothes Feet, Traveler's Shoes Others. What was with this rearguard over-specialization? I saw that her status was extremely unbalanced. Only the rearguard CLA.S.SES were chosen. A few of them were even at level 200, which one must pay to achieve. Even her gears boosted her intelligence, so it seemed she put quite a bit of effort into this. At level 1000, her attack and HP were extremely low, but her intelligence was higher than that of most doped characters. It was a tremendous number that even Migraz could not reach in his prime. Still, she'd be a sitting duck against Libra. Before Libra and Ares arrived, Dina and I standardized our words to have a matching cover-up story. We didn't know where the attack came from, but I just somehow dealt with it. It wasn't a lie since I actually did deal with it. It was Dina who launched the attack though. Well, whatever. I noticed Dina had changed back to her familiar blue-haired form. This was done using a kind of water magic, illusion which used mists to confuse the opponents and change one's appearance. In the game, I knew that its effect basically increased one's chance of avoiding an encounter. Many players wanted the developer to make it change appearances, but there seemed to be no plans to implement that. To think that it would become a reality here, the world was truly full of surprises. She had both metal and water attributes since this was a racial trait of half-elves. How cunning! Half-elves did not grow as fast as elves in terms of intelligence and mental power, but they were stronger in other areas where humans excelled. They had high affinities for both divine and arcane magic, so they could use 2 attributes at the same time. Moreover, unlike elves, half-elves could eat meat normally. As people of the forest, elves did not eat meat. This was the reason Migraz's HP was so low, despite the fact that he was already. He was even taken out by the in one hit. In the game, the inability to eat orc meat was a definite handicap for the elves. This landmine would not be noticed until one started doping, in other words, this was usually only noticed when one was close to level 1000. In this way, it was really terrible. But half-elves did not have this handicap. What a cheat! This would probably be nerfed later on. Or perhaps, the developer intended for elves to have another way to increase HP other than consuming orc meat. Anyway, we recruited Agakeros and returned Dina to the group, so we got into Tanaka and left Gjallarhorn behind. It was getting a bit cramped with this number of people. I should consider expanding Tanaka. Should I take the chance to incorporate bulletproof GLA.S.S or carbon material? Even though such materials did not exist in this world and they could not be made in the game, it should be possible now. Creating a material using the knowledge from the other side, it was somewhat interesting to see what would be the level limit of a golem made with such a material. In the game, it was impossible to retrofit a golem with other materials once it was made. There was no other choice except to create an entirely new golem. But now, it might not be impossible. Although this world was similar to the game, it was not the game itself. By the way, Agakeros, do you have any useful information? Since you were with the demons earlier, you must have heard of various things. I sat on the sofa that we prepared in the car and asked Agakeros, who was sitting opposite in his humanoid form. Ares sat next to Agakeros, munching on the corn that was bought in Gjallarhorn. Ares originally wanted to eat the GRA.S.S there, but I stopped him. If he did that in his humanoid form, it would seem as if I was abusing him. I just couldn't bear to watch. By the way, Agakeros' favorite was dandelions. Imagine the figure of a mature gentleman eating a dandelion. This was so cruel and surreal. In the end, they were still a goat and sheep, despite looking like humans. I see. Firstly, besides me, there is another member of the 12 heavenly stars who was working with the demons. Oh. Who is it? Speak. Of the Scorpion has become a revenant of vengeance and is fully cooperating with the demons. Unlike me who was making use of the demons, she has become the demon's tool, hoping for the complete destruction of all humanoids. The country founded by the Adventure King was destroyed by her. Hey, that was the most dangerous thing that was done so far. I held on to my head and sighed, despite trying to hold it in. Scorpius of the Scorpion was, well, as her name suggested, a scorpion-type magical beast. The magical beast species was Emperor Berserk Scorpion, commonly called Berserk Emperor. Its normal attacks were laced with venom and it could release a poisonous fog, adding poison on top of poison to create a deadly poison. Basically, it was a specialist that repeatedly used poison, and more poison. Besides poison, an Emperor Berserk Scorpion had no other attack. However, it was very hard, so its opponent would be forced into a battle of endurance. Even if its attack power was low, one must not feel relieved because when its HP reached a certain value, it would become berserk and attack with amazing vigor. This would be very bad. However, she was not a frightening opponent for me. Sorry to say, but a fellow who could only inflict abnormal statuses would be just a small fry before my dress. However, for a city or a country, there would be no scarier opponent. This was because it could spray deadly poison over everyone. This would basically turn the country over to destruction. It was so dangerous that it seemed like a joke. Ah, Scorpius, she really wars.h.I plus Pedrupasama. When that wars.h.I plus p turns into hate, I think she is currently an extremely dangerous existence. After finest.h.I plus ng his corn, Ares concurred. Libra also nodded in agreement. Was the Scorpion such a dangerous person? Indeed. That person is currently a revenant of vengeance that would not even listen to me. Her overwhelming hatred Serpa.s. said the level limit, allowing her to reach level 900. It's too much even for me to handle. What was this amazing thing? A tamer's magical beast was limited to level 800, yet she somehow exceeded this upper limit. I glanced at Libra and asked, Libra, if you fight her, what are the odds? The chance of victory is probably around 62%. I estimated Scorpius' current strength based on her previous data. Her fighting power Serpa.s.ses mine. By using Brachium at the start, her HP could be drastically reduced, but it would not be enough to defeat her. After that, it would be a simple fight based on our abilities, depending on whether I would collapse first or she would be taken out first. Even Libra, my current strongest follower, considered her to be dangerous. I thought she would definitely win since poison was ineffective towards golems, but it seemed Scorpius was unreasonably strong. However, Ares could win by using Mesarthim to deal with the poison's continuous damage. No matter how high the defense, it would be useless before an attack that could inflict proportional damage. Endurance battle was Ares' specialty after all. Since both of them had fire attribute, their compatibility was good. Even if Scorpius went berserk, she would not inflict too much damage. On the other hand, Agacaros would be helpless since he already admitted that she was too much for him to handle. As for Dina, she had the advantage in terms of attributes, but her HP was too low. I didn't think she could handle the attacks of the Berserk Scorpion. Anyway, her current location was still unknown, so it would be pointless to dwell on this. Well, if we met her, there would be no choice other than Ares. Since she was currently dwelling with the demons, we could only leave it be for now. Next, Leon the Lion is fighting a war with Bennett Nash the Vampire Princess all day and night. The strongest of the 12 heavenly stars, Leon, and the strongest of the 7 heroes, Bennett Nash, are engaged in an all-out war with their armies. Even if the demon's 7 luminaries approached carelessly, they would just get killed. Bennett Nash should have a slight advantage. Her melee combat power Serpa.s. said mine, after all. No, that is, among the 12 heavenly stars, Leon has always been a deviant with little loyalty to you. After your disappearance, he went wild completely, returning him to level 1000. Wow, what a mess. They started a top-tier battle while ignoring me and the heroes. Bennett Nash at her prime versus Boss Era Leon. I wanted to watch such a dreamlike battle, but I really didn't want to get too close. Hey, Ego. I think Bennett Nash is abnormally obsessed with Rupasama as her rival, yes. Ever since she lost to Rupasama in a fight, she became obsessed with her goal of Serpa.S.Sing Rupasama. Leon is the same. Even though he was the strongest magical beast, he lost to Rupasama and became her follower. He has been eyeing the throne of Rupasama even while obeying her. An advice, Master. If Master approaches them, there is an 80% chance that Bennett Nash and Leon would interrupt their fight in order to attack Master. I retracted my previous statement. It wasn't that I didn't want to get too close. It was that I wasn't far enough. I definitely should not get close at all. Unlike the other 12 heavenly stars and 7 heroes, Leon and Bennett Nash seemed to regard me as an enemy. A level 1000 Power and a level 1000 boss monster were engaged in Ma.S.S combat with their armies. It would be a joke if I just gleefully rushed into the middle of it. I would leave their location for the last. They were already fighting like old friends anyway. Also, this might not be important, but it seems Leavitian has successfully summoned a hero. Oh. Hearing this, I made an unexpected response. Apparently, this world had properly summoned a hero this time. Since it was a hero, he probably had the hidden CLA.S.S hero. It was the strongest Vanguard CLA.S.S that would become unlocked after reaching level 200 in Warrior, Light Warrior, Heavy Warrior, and Swordmaster CLA.S.SES. In the game, it was practically unknown until discovered it. I didn't know anyone else besides Aelioth who took that CLA.S.S. This was because it was very inefficient to unlock that CLA.S.S. Warrior, Light Warrior, Heavy Warrior, and Swordmaster had very similar abilities. Normally, a player would choose only one of these Iron Plate type CLA.S.SES. In addition, there was very little reason in expanding these basic CLA.S.SES to level 200 with the cash shop. If the cash shop was to be used to expand a CLA.S.S, it would be an advanced CLA.S.S of Swordmaster or a CLA.S.S with no further advancement, such as an alchemist. This was the basic of basics among players in the game. But Aelioth did it. Ignoring the ability scores and inefficiency, he added all the Vanguard CLA.S.SES. Since this completely ignored the CLA.S.SIG method of character building, high-level players like me considered it to be a joke character. Even Aelioth himself was partially taking it as a joke. There was no way for this build to become strong. We were all convinced of this. But that ridiculous build unlocked a hidden CLA.S.S and Aelioth suddenly became the strongest character. As if to compensate for the bad growth rate earlier, his ability scores were raised a lot. The skills were also atrocious. Most notably, the skill Climax, which would resurrect the character after being reduced to 0 HP and counterattack with a 100% chance of inflicting a critical hit. If that CLA.S.S was unlocked right from the start, if it was nurtured starting from level 1, the hero would probably have the same ability scores as doping players just by leveling normally. That is no good. I rubbed my chin and muttered. The hero CLA.S.S was very powerful, therefore this could be troublesome. The trouble was that the demons knew about the hero summoning. Since Agakeros knew about this, it was evident that the demons had received the same information. At low level, the hero would not be much of a threat. But after leveling up, he would be a monster comparable to me and the 7 heroes. They knew that. So what would happen after that? What would they do? What would I do if I was in their position? This would be predetermined, kill him before he could grow up. This was the best method. The hero is going to be killed. Hero, the hope of the weak humanoids. He would be killed before the curtains were drawn. N.O. Body here could dispute this statement of mine. Author's notes Rupas, it seems the two of you have been fighting like old friends. Bennett, Omega Wa Leon, Omega Wa Translators Notes. Welcome back to this blog. I will be your host for the next 10 chapters, while works on chapter 51 to 60. I added internal links from the main text to the footnotes. You should be able to return to the main text by clicking on the back b.u.t.ton at the end of the footnote. Let me know if there is any issue with the links. Footnotes. Doping is the use of banned athletic performance enhancing drugs by athletic compet.i.tours. In this novel, the word refers to the use of ability boosting items, such as orc meat, which increases HP scales of the G.O.dis, is a boss mentioned in. The text here actually says selection scales, which is the drop item. This made no sense unless Megrez was knocked out when the item dropped on his head. The author probably made a mistake here, confusing the boss name with the item name. Scorpius is the constellation of the Scorpion, containing many bright stars such as Antares. The A.S. associated astrological sign is Scorpio. Hradi is a sword in the Volsung cycle. It was a part of Fafnir's treasure, which Sigurd took after he slew the dragon. Fecta, also called Gamma Ursae Majoris, is a star in the constellation of Ursa Major and the Big Dipper asterism. In this novel, Fecta is the Adventure King, the Hobbit member of the Seven Heroes. Alioth, also called Epsilon Ursae Majoris, is the brightest star in the constellation of Ursa Major and the Big Dipper asterism. In this novel, Alioth is the Sword King, the human member of the Seven Heroes. A wild last boss appeared. Translator, Hand of Vecna. Editor, 2 more free thoughts. The hero is going to be killed. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement with this statement of mine. Yet there was no negativity in the atmosphere. In the first place, to put it bluntly, the hero was merely a stranger to the 12 heavenly stars. There was no reason to be pessimistic about it. But it was different for me. In the game, it was the hero who eventually defeated the Demon King, so it would be troubling if he died at this point. Thus, I said it in the serious tone of something important was going to happen, but Ares and the others merely responded as if they didn't really care. That seems like it. They probably thought I was just making small talks. As expected of Rapasama. That is indeed the case. The demons would probably send someone from 7 luminaries today or tomorrow depending on the hero's departure. Well, that's probably true. There's no need to wait for him to become strong. There is no reason to match the monsters and dungeons to the hero's current strength. Dina also nodded in agreement to Agakero's words, making a remark that dismissed every RPG in the world. This couldn't be helped. If a newbie came under attack by the last boss right at the start, the setting couldn't be established and the game would be unplayable. Even the last boss would be trying desperately to make it enjoyable for players. I knew that. Anyway, the timing of the hero's departure was too good. No. It was Dina who pushed this topic on me. In other words, she raised this topic in time with the hero's departure. It seemed Dina also thought that it would be troublesome if the hero died at this stage. Leaviteen has a sword saint as usual. Since it is the kingdom of swords, their soldiers should be of fairly high standards. A.S. Summing the 7 luminaries will attack, how much of a fight can they put up? I asked Agakero since, like Dina, he would know about the strength of the demons. Agakeros muttered to himself and then spoke, that's right. That country is the sword. If the barrier set up by the Sword King Alioth is still active, the 7 luminaries would be repelled. Rapasama. As Agakeros answered me, Dina forcibly interrupted for some reasons. What is this? You actually love expositions, don't you? Or was she just desperate to hold on to her position as the one who set the expositions? In contrast with the 2 who were competing for a strange position, Ares and Libra were rather quiet. Ares was preparing to eat his second corn, while Libra was an uninvolved ornament in the corner. Barrier. Yes. The skill of the hero soul succession. Its effect is, as you already know, Rapasama. I see. Soul succession. Its effect was to greatly increase the abilities of player characters and reduce those of enemies within the skills area. It was just a skill that combined buff with debuff, but the strange part was that its effect would continue even after the battle was over. However, the demerit was huge. When it was used, the hero would die instantly and be returned to the town with no time to use resurrection magic. When this was a game, Alioth would rush back from the town into battle after dying due to the use of this skill. There would be exchanges like "I thought you were dead," and "too bad, it's just a trick." In this world, using the skill was equivalent to dying, I guess. Naturally, it wouldn't be something ridiculous like running back from the town after dying. This is the reason the country continues to survive until now after losing the hero. No, that's not it. Even now, Aelioth is protecting the country. Svalin depended on Megrez and Levia. Gjallarhorn depended on Merak's coercion. And Leavitian depended on the barrier. They were defending their countries in their own ways. Hradi, which was destroyed by the fool Scorpius, probably did not have such a strong defense. However, Fekta had levels in the monster tamer CLA.S.S, so it would not be strange if at least one powerful magical beast was left in defense of the country. Did it die in battle with the Demon King? In any case, it should be safe to think that all the surviving countries had some kind of defensive measures. I see, so it should be safe within the country for now. So that's how it is. Even Agakeros and I would have some difficulties fighting a Ma.S.Civ number of humans within that barrier. Of course, we should still be able to inflict some devastating damage. Based on what Ares said, it seemed that even the 12 heavenly stars were wary of that barrier. How admirable! The level difference between the 12 heavenly stars and the humanoids was as wide as heaven and earth. To be able to make Ares hesitate, its effect must be immense. Of course, even when facing buffed opponents while being debuffed, we could still drive the country to near destruction and annihilate the knightly order. However, the 7 luminaries would have no way to accomplish this. This A.S. summed that the 7 luminaries did not include level 1000 characters like Dina. This was also proof that they had N.O. body else like Dina. Because if they did have someone like her, they could just drop a meteor from outside the barrier and that would be the end of it. Therefore, even though there might be some differences among the 7 luminaries, everyone besides Dina was like. To put it bluntly, it was a gathering of small fries. But I did not feel any special influence when I was in that country. Did the barrier really exist? Did it not affect me since I was a player? Or was I too stupid to notice its effect? This was slightly worrying. If it is me, there is a 98% chance of taking down Leavitian, Master. That's enough. I didn't know why Libra was bragging, but I struggled to keep myself from sighing. Now I thought about it, it was a good thing that Libra remained in the tomb all this time. If it was her, the barrier would not matter if she used Brachium. Buff and debuff were irrelevant before fixed damage. Back on topic. So as long as they remain in the country, they would not be threatened. If Scorpius Sama, the Demon King, or his son do not appear, it would be safe. Conversely, if they appear, they would be in danger of destruction. Also, if they leave the country, they could be attacked as well. In other words, they will be watched as soon as they begin the journey. They will encounter the 7 luminaries once they leave the country. Dina declared with confidence. Indeed, as soon as they left the country, it would be a wild 7 luminaries appeared. Yes, it would be checkmate. Or the boss just came out by himself. This was forbidden in RPG. In addition, since this was spoken by Dina who was one of the 7 luminaries, it must have been a prearranged matter. According to customs, the hero would probably be accompanied by the Sword Saint and so on, but they could not possibly overwhelm the 7 luminaries. The 7 luminaries would surely appear to ambush the hero. Conversely, this would be a good opportunity to attack the 7 luminaries. Everyone, wait here. I will go to Leavitian. Honestly, I wanted to help the hero, but it would be hard to convince Ares and the others. Therefore, I would do it myself. If it were just the 7 luminaries, there was no need for company. The only one who could catch up with me flying at full speed would be Dina, provided she moved ahead of time. If it was Libra, she could catch up after a while, but there was no need to bring this dangerous object to the royal capital. If she fired Brachium, it would be the worst possible scenario for the royal capital. Dina, no, it would not do. Dina mentioned that the 7 luminaries knew that Dina was Venus. If Dina showed up behind me to oppose the 7 luminaries, it would be taken as a betrayal. This would ruin her cover as a double agent. Currently, it would be better to let them think that Venus was an ally. Master, are you planning to go alone? No problem. If it's the like of 7 luminaries, even if they all attacked me simultaneously, I can defeat them. Libra sounded a little worried, but there should be no problem. It might be a bit conceited, but if they were just like Mars and Jupiter, there was no way I would lose. Even if I was lacking allies, I could just create a few golems on the spot in the worst possible scenario. Well, I wouldn't lose as long as I didn't become too reckless. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't worry. I said that to Ares and the others, then stepped out of Tanaka. Considering the current situation of the world, it would not be a mistake to eliminate the 7 luminaries whenever possible. I didn't know what the Demon King was thinking, but the impression was that he never moved on his own. The active ones were the 7 luminaries and the 12 heavenly stars. 2 of the 7 luminaries had been defeated. Excluding Dina, there were only 4 people left. If I eliminated one of them this time, there would be only 3 people left. This should be advantageous to the humanoids. As I pondered this, I spread my wings and soared into the sky. It felt good to be free from the constraints of gravity. I would never be tired of this. This was the time when I was glad to be a flugel. Cutting through the winds, I shortened the distance in one breath. The distance that Tanaka took several days to travel was covered in merely tens of minutes. This feeling was irresistible, but what was really going on with these wings? I remembered seeing somewhere that a human would need, but my wings were not that big. They were quite big, but each wing was only 1.5 meters. Despite this, I was able to fly normally. It was truly a fantasy. After flying for tens of minutes, I was in the sky above Laevitian where I was first summoned. It was nostalgic, despite it not being that long ago. In fact, only a few weeks had passed. In a way, I was grateful to this country. I was here because this country messed up the summoning. And because I was here, I met Ares and the others. This was probably a funny way to think. Normally, I should be angry that I was separated from my peaceful life in J.A.Pan. Wisconsin H.I+NG to return home soon was probably the correct way to think. But, why? I did not think so at all. It was not just about being homesick. I did not even feel nostalgic for my hometown. A peaceful life, guaranteed safety, reliable housing, and readily available food and clothing. Numerous entertainment. It was a big difference. Compared to a world threatened by demons, the difference was as wide as heaven and earth. If I was to say which was the blessed world, it would most certainly be the other world. But why? It was almost like a dream. It did not feel real, as if it was merely a movie on a screen. It felt like a different world to me. It did not feel real. There were memories of staying and growing up there, but it felt like someone else's memories instead, as if I was being shown the peaceful life of a stranger in a drama or perhaps in another person's memories. It seemed I was currently being dyed in the splendid yet dangerous feelings of Rupas. No, maybe it was from the beginning. Oops. Now was not the time to think about such things. No, I should say this was not something to think about at all. I shook my head and looked at Laevitian again. As I looked closely, something like a barrier seemed to cover all over the royal capital. Originally, the skills area of effect should not be so wide. It seemed to be a difference between reality and the game. Or was it Aleotha's last will? I see, with this, the 7 luminaries would not be able to come close. Do you not think so? I muttered and called out to someone behind. I had not confirmed the person's appearance yet. I sensed someone appearing suddenly just before I shook my head. I could sense that the person was just standing behind me without doing anything. A sudden appearance would imply teleportation via X-Gate. I confirmed it with Dina that the only teleport magic currently in the world was X-Gate. There wasn't any other. The condition required to use X-Gate was to be able to use both divine magic and arcane magic. Therefore, it was considered impossible to be used by the Flugels, who could use only divine magic, and by the vampires, who could use only arcane magic. In addition, the Beastkin generally did not like magic, so it was probably not used by them in the present time. As such, it was considered to be magic that few people could use. This was not Dina. This penetrating hostility and the oppressive feeling were not hers. This was different from the 7 luminaries. Their sense of presence was not so great. Then the possible answers were sorely limited. And I already got the answer. It was just a hunch, but I was fairly certain. I never met him, but I knew him well. I wondered when this encounter would come. We must have shared, feared, and longed for this feeling over the past 200 years. Right? Demon King. To my own surprise, I distorted my face with a smile that seemed belligerent. Thus, I spoke to that guy behind me. Translator, Hand of Vecna Editor, 2 more free thoughts. He was an ordinary male J.A. Payne's high school student in 2015. Age 17. Height 170 centimeters. Weight 60 kilograms. This was an average body shape. Also, he didn't have anything that he was particularly good at, or bad at. His results were slightly above average. He was decent in sports, but he was not the best in his CLA.S.S. Be it studies or sports, he was merely slightly above average. His looks were well featured. Although it was not the type of face like an idol which would cause commotion wherever he went, he was still one of the good-looking guys in his CLA.S.S. Such a guy was currently being troubled in a place far from J.A. Pan, or rather, he wasn't even on Earth, but in the other world of Midgard. There was a voice in his head, asking for help. He answered, seeking the person in distress. If that person was injured, he would call an ambulance. If that person was salted, he would rush to the scene. He would answer a call for help, no matter who it might be. But all those worries came to an end when he was asked to defeat the demons and the overlord in another world. He could not understand. He was so perplexed that he thought it was a joke. It had been more than 40 years since the great accomplishment of landing Apollo 11 on the moon in 1969. Science and technology had advanced by leaps and bounds, but humans had yet to leave the solar system. Even so, by means of an occult power like magic, he landed in another world without wearing a S.P.A.C suit. Even though the situation was beyond his understanding, he quickly adapted. Or perhaps he was just a fool. He was in the unprecedented situation of being summoned to another world by himself, yet he neither cried out to return home nor became angry. Instead, he calmly listened to the people around him and the young elf, who was actually more than 200 years old, that summoned him. They explained the reason he was summoned and what he needed to do. All these, he obediently accepted. It was not that he did not fear combat. However, he had a dream, a reckless ideal for the future, guided by the optimism of youth. Since he was little, he wanted to be a policeman. He longed to be a modern hero that helped people. It was a blueprint for the future drawn by a child who knew nothing of corruptions and under-the-table dealings. He grew up watching the back of his father, who was a policeman. He was proud of his father, whom people could always count on. Therefore, he wanted, longed for, and aimed to be like that. Even now, this dream had not faded. It was honestly unimaginable to fight the Demon King and the Overlord in another world. He did not want to kill anyone even now. However, he simply could not ignore the hands reaching out to him for help. If he abandoned them here, the future he dreamed of would never come to pass. This was the reason he answered the pleading of the people from another world. The hero, father, who was still S.H.I+ing in his heart, would not simply abandon them. Although I tried enthusiastically, I wish I have the abilities to accompany it. SEI muttered in a whisper while matching swords with the swordsman's H.I+P teacher Friedrich in the training area. However, being distracted during training was suicidal. All the more so when his opponent was the much stronger sword saint, the world's strongest swordsman. Friedrich sent SEI's sword flying and pointed his own sword to the latter's throat. And that was game over. SEI raised his hands to surrender and looked at his teacher once more. Due to the cool nickname of the Sword Saint and the resounding name of Friedrich, he had originally imagined a handsome knight. Instead, his appearance was very different. If one was to describe him in a word, it would be tiger. This was not a figurative description. His face was really a tiger. No, not just his face. His entire body was covered in orange fur with black stripes. He was over 2 meters tall, and he wore armor while swinging a sword. His powerful presence was certain to bend one over at the waist on the first encounter. Indeed, Sei was bent over. Moreover, he had cat-like habits, such as smaller than himself for no reason. When he had free time, he was always stuck in a gap or he would enter a box from which he could not get out. But he could not be described as a bipedal cat. His pride as a tiger was strong. Even if he had cat-like reactions, he was still a great tiger beastkin. Even if he brought home a mouse, he was still a tiger. Growl. The sword saint growled loudly. Sei strongly wished that he could speak in a human language. It was not that beastkins could not speak human languages. He had heard them converse normally before. However, the sword saint only growled like a tiger. He could probably speak in a human language if he wanted to. That was what the young elf said, but Sei had never heard him speak. The captain seems to be angry that Sei-sama is distracted during a mock battle. The person who was translating the sword saint's words was the female vice-captain. A female knight should be a beauty, it should be like that, but the reality was different. That crude facial feature was more like a female gorilla. Her muscular, dark skin with hair in, along with her thick lips and big nostrils, crushed the image of the female knight to pieces. She was most certainly not an Amazon. Also, if you looked closely, you could see the nasal hair sticking out of her nose. This was the reality. Grr, the captain says that he wants to eat chicken today. No, even if you tell me that, growl. The captain says he wants to go outside, so today's training is over. Isn't the sword saint being a bit too whimsical? Friedrich was really whimsical. A while ago, he dreamed that he was playing with a ball, so he abruptly ended the training and ran off somewhere else. Perhaps he was just a big cat. Sei held back the urge to say it out loud. Even so, he was the sword saint, the only sword master in the world. He was a symbol of this country, so one could not speak ill of him. Sei Dano. Oh, Krusan? What is it? As Sei stared helplessly at the back of the sword saint, a young elf came running towards him. He was the one responsible for summoning Sei to this world. Despite his appearance, he was already 200 years old and was serving as the king's advisor. His full name was, wasn't it? The traveling members have been assembled. Please present yourself before the king along with Friedrich Dano. Hearing this, Sei tightened his expression. It finally came, he thought. Despite being a hero, Sei had been an ordinary person living peacefully in J.A.Pan until recently. Even though he had been training swordsmans.H.I+P since then, traveling alone would still be suicidal. Therefore, it was necessary to make proper preparations for his companions and equipment. The king told him to train while they made the preparations. Now, it seemed those preparations were complete. This implied to start of his journey. I understand. Hero, the time has come for departure. Yes. Sei and Friedrich kneeled and bowed their heads before the king. A few strangers were standing beside the throne. Sei thought they were probably his future comrades. Equipment, human resources. I am confident that the best of what is currently available has been procured. First and foremost, the pride of our country, the sword saint Friedrich. Growl. He answered as the king called his name. No, at least speak before the king. Isn't this rude? Sei thought. However, this seemed to be usual and N.O. Body said anything. Master of Divine Magic, my advisor, the Acolyte Cruz. I will put my life on the line. The next to be called was the young elf. He must be strong for his name to be called here. It was said that he was one of the few survivors from the battle with Rupas 200 years ago. He should be an acceptable candidate. The valedictorian from Svalin's Arcane Magic Academy, Alfie. She was also trained in swordsmans.H.I+P by her father, Gans the mercenary. Her abilities would be helpful to you. It's an honor to be chosen, Your Majesty. One of the people standing beside the king, a seemingly strong-willed girl with brown side ponytail hair responded. Like a mage, she wore a black cloak, covering her white S.H.I+RT and red skirt. Well, whatever, but her skirt was a bit short. Was she being seductive? Also from Svalin, the Wisdom King Migres Sama's steel golems. Most of the golems were destroyed by Ares of the 12 heavenly stars. Even so, upon hearing of the hero's departure, he hurriedly created these. Kaka, kaka. The golems stepped forward with a rough noise. Their intimidating auras were not inferior to the sword saints. And in case of emergency, there are 10 rangers of the covert team to support you from the shadows. Each is an elite over level 50. Suddenly, there was a group of men in black next to the king. Their faces were completely covered. When they noticed SEI's gaze, they gave a thumbs up. Next are the 4 members of Hawkeye. They brought the treasures of the Overlord from the Black-Winged Royal Tomb. We have specially selected your weapons from them. Hearing the king's words, the eyes of the Sword Saint, Cruz, and the girl shone. SEI didn't really know, but they seemed to be of considerable worth. Anyway, it seemed that they weren't going to just send him off with just a cypress stick. Alfie, Cruz, and the tiger were genuinely happy about the weapons presented to SEI and the rest. Even SEI, who was unfamiliar with weapons, could tell with a glance that they had a strange presence. Indeed, the pure warriors and mages, who were residents of this world, were really pleased. Come, it's time to start the journey. Hero and his companions, be sure to defeat the Demon King and the resurrected Overlord and clear the dark clouds of our time. So the journey had already started. As he thought this, SEI stood up hurriedly. At the same time, the others also stood up and Alfie joined in. The surroundings echoed with the sound of trumpets. The noisy cheers of the citizens were heard from outside the castle. With SEI in the lead, they marched forward as if it was a parade. As they left the castle, people flocked to see them. Damn. This is Super Embera.s.sing. SEI blushed and walked quickly. He wanted to leave the capital as fast as possible. The next few minutes were like a parade for public execution. Eventually, SEI and his companions finally reached the city gate. Now, it begins. An adventure to save the world. He used to think that this only happened in video games. It was a heroic saga that one would watch in safety through the screen. Yet he was currently in such a situation, being the protagonist himself. The only difference was the ability to continue from a saved game. With increasing nervousness, he started sweating. Don't be afraid. Don't be frightened. Now, look ahead, and step forward. Although he thought that he was unsuitable for this and that there were more qualified people around, he was currently the hero. Therefore, to avoid worrying his companions, he looked and black feathers entered his field of vision. Immediately after, a black angel descended as if it was a dance. A crimson cloak covered her pure white dress. The ominous black wings on her back were a symbolic presence. Her golden hair, mixed with a tint of vermilion, danced like the flames. Her beauty could not be described as anything but peerless. Even though she merely landed, the ground cracked. Her forceful presence alone suppressed the ranger team. This can't be right. Are you, Rupa's muffle? Alfie muttered in fear, while Cruz screamed. SEI thought, as I expected. His legs were shaking with only a glance. His entire body was overwhelmed by fear. There was no mistake. It was her. This woman was the Black-Winged Overlord. A wild Rupa's muffle appeared. Even though he thought of such silly notifications, it did not diminish the fear. Fear. Yes, SEI was currently feeling fear that was unprecedented since his birth. Even his teeth were rattling. No. We cannot fight this. This was a monster that merely looked human. There was nothing in this dimension that could challenge her. But, why is the reality so heartless? To encounter the Overlord on his first step of the journey was already the worst scenario, yet the nightmare still continued. Rupas looked up into the sky. Following her gaze, SEI also looked up, and saw another person. No, monster. It was a man. He was a good-looking guy with blue skin, which no human would have. His black hair was fluttering, while his eyes were golden. A black cloak covered his entire body. The air around him was distorted like a mirage. And, despite any reluctance to admit it, his presence was not inferior to the black-winged woman. He slowly descended and touched the ground. His position was on the opposite side of Rupa's. He stared at her with SEI in between them. "Stop it, you fool. Don't flank us." SEI wanted to shout it out. Idiot, no, a thing like this." Cruz's face was so white that the others worried if he was dead. Tears flooded his eyes as his face distorted in despair. It seemed Cruz recognized the other guy as well. It was someone he knew and feared from the bottom of his heart. Demon King. Why is the Demon King here? A wild Demon King appeared. It was just the first step of their journey. The hero and his companions were sandwiched between the two bosses, the Overlord and the Demon King. What sort of is it? And SEI thought, we are dead, right? Authors notes this, colored picture is provided by. Thank you. SEI, level 15 Alfie, level 72 Cruz, level 88 Friedrich, level 120 player. Oh, everyone except the hero is strong. I understand, until the hero grows up, he is just a sub-character warrior. In addition, since Rupas will be fighting the Demon King, this is just an event battle whereby you try hard not to die for several turns. If left alone, the Demon King will attack only Rupas. But if you attack and target him, he will annihilate you instantly. Therefore, let's work on defense and recovery. Player, what is this S.H.I plus TTY game? Translators notes some readers have complained about spoilers in the upcoming chapter T.I.Tles, so I have removed them from the, except for the T.I.Tle of the next chapter. Consider it as a next episode preview you find in most TV series. The colored picture above is from the web novel, thus she looks a bit different from the pictures in the light novel and manga. It's interesting to see her alternative look. I think I accidentally messed up the blog template. Let me know if there's any issue with this new one. Footnotes: Minamijayaji literally means Southern Cross, which is an asterism in the constellation of Crocs. Common Era, CE, is one of the notations of the world's most widely used calendar era. This is a non-religious alternative to the Anno Domini, Year of the Lord, devised by Dionysius Exiguus in 525. The word used here is, literally, Western calendar. SEI was summoned in 2015, since this web novel was posted in 2015 to 2017. When it comes to a cat squeezing into a box, there can only be Maru, who has the most YouTube views for an animal in the Guinness World Records, September 2016. Dreadlocks, also, are rope-like strands of hair formed by matting or braiding hair. Cruz Northern is a reference to the Northern Cross asterism. How convenient, one character is the Southern Cross, while the other is the Northern Cross. What are the odds? Penalty game is a common element in J.A.Pain stage comedy and variety shows, which involve some sort of compet.I.tion or bet. The winner forces the loser to predict .I.P.8 in the penalty that involves doing or experiencing something unpleasant. A wild last boss appeared. Translator, Hand of Vecna editor, 2 more free thoughts. S.P.A.ce itself was distorted. It was like a landscape painting by a child, twisted beyond its original shape. Such a surreal landscape would not be real. An illusion. This was the illusory perceptions of SEI and the others, caused by fear and the enormous presences of Rupas and the Demon King. S.P.A.ce was not actually distorted. However, even if everyone present recognized this, it was no different from reality itself as the Black-Winged Overlord and the Demon King faced each other in this distorted world. The hero was not even acknowledged in their eyes. They merely confirmed each other's ident.I.ties, completing a world that consisted only of themselves. The unfortunate hero who was sandwiched between them was an existence no different from a rock. As such, both sides ignored SEI and his companions, staring intently at each other. I have waited a long time for this. Very soon, the man's voice broke the silence. It was a deep and calm voice. Unbelievably, there was no sense of sharpness. Instead, it was like a young man who met his unrequited love. Unbelievably, this is the first time we met. Even so, we are familiar with each other. Therefore, this does not feel like our first meeting. The man spoke with the hero in between them. The Demon King was the archenemy of all humanoids, the pinnacle of demonkind, and the threat to the world. He was the manifestation of death and horror. The King of Demons, who overwhelmed the 7 heroes, continued speaking without reservation before the black-winged overlord. Well, this may seem unnecessary now. Greetings. Your people know me as the Demon King. Alcor. This is the name we have for you. It is certain death for us to encounter you. Out of fear, we call you Alcor, the star that brings death. His eyes narrowed in vertical slits like a snake as he gazed affectionately at his rival whom he did not battle in the past 200 years. Before such a gaze, Rapaz remained unmoved and returned a fearless smile. If the Demon King was a monster, she would be one as well. They could stand before each other as equals precisely because they were on the same level as each other. Thus, there was no reason to fear. Her face had the expression of someone in a position of strength. That was why she was not afraid. Or so others would think, but in truth, she was thinking, what's with this pressure? I should just smile through this. It may seem unnecessary, but it's good manners to return a self-introduction. I am Rapaz Mafal, the being your kind calls the star that brings death. Although they knew each other, this was still the first time they met. It was weird, even funny, to call oneself by this. To unknown nickname. They were talking calmly on the surface, but the fight had already begun. The Demon King, ORM, was using mental skills, which were negated by Rapaz's equipment that granted immunity to abnormal statuses. On the other hand, ORM resisted her coercion skill by virtue of his level. Both sides were using powerful skills. If it were not Rapaz and ORM, the fight would have already ended. However, this was just child's play to both of them. Both sides understood that it would not be effective, treating it only as a simple greeting. However, the hero and his companions, who were sandwiched between the two, were in a pathetic state. They were afflicted by fear, attack power reduced, and forced to the ground by coercion, movement disabled. Honestly, I didn't expect you to take action personally. Are you really that afraid of the hero? Don't be a fool. There are only 2 people that I fear. One is the omniscient and omnipotent G.O.Dis. The other is the one before me, the star that brings death. Everyone else is merely dust. So is this current situation beyond your expectation? No, I expected this. I came here to meet you. What a contradictory statement. He said he wanted to meet despite being afraid. Rapaz prompted him with her silence. ORM continued, let's be honest here. I was afraid of you. I wanted to avoid having a direct confrontation with you. I was frightened of fighting the star that brings death and the 12 stars that follow you as well as the heroes who gathered under your leaders. H.I+P. I feared, I was frightened. I thought of you day and night. I will not deny my cowardly nature. This is an undeniable truth after all. Yet you show up so easily this time. After you were gone, I finally noticed that you were the only being that existed outside the G.O.Dis scenario. I realized you are an existence that the world could not afford to lose. Rapaz narrowed her eyes at ORM's mysterious explanations. Her expression suggested that she did not know what he was trying to say. No, not just her. SEI and the rest also could not understand what the Demon King was saying. What do you mean? Do you want to know? Then, use your full power and find out. Use simple violence, like you used to do 200 years ago. Well, even if you refuse, I will still attack. Crack. ORM cracked his finger joints. In response, Rapaz slowly clenched her fists. And it began. SEI and his companions felt it in their bodies, predicting the fight that was about to start. Here and now, it was starting. The fight between the Overlord and the Demon King did not happen 200 years ago. This would be a top-notched duel that N.O. Body had ever seen. How fearless. Then, let me grant your Wisconsin H. Plus let me witness if the power of the star that brings death had dulled over the past 200 years. Top, Libra, Virgo, Dina. Bottom, Rupas, Agacaros, Aries, Carcanos. Top, Scorpius, Luna, ORM, Demon King. Bottom, Venus, Terra, SEI, Hero. An explosion. The air exploded above the heads of SEI and his companions, but both of them were no longer there. This was a speed that the human eye could not follow. The two kings fought in the air over their heads at an unrecognizable speed, repeatedly coming into contact and then separating. The battle was fought in the air. Moving at a speed that the others could not follow, the two people exchanged countless fists using the sky as their stage. Blows after blows, all of them were advanced skills with the power to kill. There was neither a feint nor a dirty trick. All of them were great skills that could kill in a hit. However, using such skills were as easy as breathing for both of them. They were fighting precisely because both of them were at the top of their games. Of course, they did not stop moving. In fact, they were in constant motion, flying around to each other's blind spot. Flying at a speed that could not be followed by an ordinary person, the two transcendent beings became flashes of light that ignored the laws of physics, turning at right angles, swirling, and testing out each other. They are like light, SEI thought. The crimson and black lights were surreal, flying around in the air like the dogfight scenes of a robot anime. This was what reflected in his eyes. Ha! Rupa seized an opening in ORM's punches and struck him. A roaring sound like the explosion from a cannon was heard. This should not have been the sound of two people fighting. But by the time the sound was heard, it was too late. Rupas was already flying high into the stratosphere, overtaking ORM. This time, it was a kick. An explosive noise was heard once more and ORM crashed into the ground like a cannonball. At the same time, cracks stretched endlessly across the ground. As if it was an earthquake, the ground shook, collapsed, and crumbled. Rupas followed up and dived towards the ground. But at the same time, ORM flew up with a kick, sending Rupas flying. Crash.h.I plus ng through rocks, trees, and other things, Rupas flew away from him. Immediately after, Rupas, who was sent flying at an unknown speed, returned at an even more incomprehensible speed with an attack directed at ORM. ORM struck with his fist once more. Rupas jumped up to dodge the attack and landed behind ORM, striking with her elbow as if she was dancing. But it was ineffectual as ORM also struck out with his elbow to counter it. A roar resounded belatedly, sending a shockwave that spread 360 degrees around. Furthermore, the ground caved in to form a huge crater with the two of them in the center, uprooting the nearby trees with a shockwave. The golems formed a wall around SEI and his companions, while Cruz raised a defensive S.H.I plus Eld. Even the winds from the shockwave were deadly to them. The defensive barrier shook unreliably as Cruz's face distorted in frustration. Furthermore, some of the golems outside the barrier were reduced to dust. As expected. This is the first time I experience a battle like this since the fight with the 7 heroes 200 years ago. Me too. You are indeed worthy of the T.I.Tle of Demon King. They laughed and slowly backed away while facing each other. To escape? No, it was for a running start. After increasing the distance, both of them kicked off explosively and charged forward. With a running start, their strikes were more intense than ever before, shaking everything and changing the terrain with the shockwave. But the two culprits were no longer there. Instead, the air detonated high up in the sky. At the same time, the sounds like roaring cannons were heard, sending out explosive shockwaves. All that remained were belated sounds and shockwaves. SEI and his companions could only understand that a fight occurred there earlier and that they almost died. This was the saddening result of their efforts. Rupa's kick sent ORM flying towards the sea. Several golems shattered in his trajectory, while the sea split in two. ORM disappeared into the far end of the sea. But the battle resumed in an instant. Explosion. A few golems that happened to be in the trajectory vanished as ORM fired his magic, which cleaved its way forward and swallowed Rupas. In time, it left Mother Midgard and broke through the atmosphere, Vanas.h.I plus ng into the other side of s.p.a.ce. Yet Rupaz, who was engulfed by it, stood there calmly. Explosion. Rupaz's knife hand strike missed and ripped the earth all the way to the horizon. The wind pressure from ORM's mist fist parted the sea. However, only the two of them could see the effects of their own attacks. Other observers could only notice the residual effects of the collisions and the shockwaves. There was no one to be seen. Their existences could only be inferred from the sounds of collisions and shockwaves. Over and over, the sky exploded, the pathetic golems were destroyed, the trees uprooted, the ground caved in, and the sea was split apart. This was supernatural. This was the ultimate. It was abnormal. It was strange. It was an aberrant power. This was not something that ordinary people could understand. They could not follow the pacing of the battle to begin with. High-ranking skills were unleashed like the rain. It was impossible to tell exactly what skills they were even using. This was a battle between monsters. There was no other way to describe it. Ignoring the narrative of a heroic saga, the last boss A and last boss B just appeared arbitrarily and started fighting after acknowledging each other. This was beyond understanding. It seemed that N.O. Body cared about SEI and his companions, making them feel rather miserable. What is that? Alfie muttered with a pale face. Her teeth were chattering and her eyes were unfocused. What? This was what everyone present thought. There was no answer to the question, what is that? That was beyond reason, beyond understanding. It completely ignored their common sense. Therefore, N.O. Body could answer the question. There was no possible answer to such a question. This is hopeless, isn't it? That kind of, you say we are to defeat, how, it's impossible to win, that kind of monsters, hey, right. SEI looked and saw Alfie in tears. Alfie, who was strong and confident before the journey, was now a terrified little girl whose will had been broken. Yet who could possibly blame her? Who could remain calm in the face of this ridiculous battle? Against those two monsters, what are we supposed to do? As Alfie cried out in tears, the sky exploded once more. This was a battle at supersonic speed. Both of them had compressed their bodily sensation of time so that they could simultaneously attack and defend as if time itself had stopped. Of course, they did not actually use any skill to stop time. If one could move fast enough to be in a state where time was infinitely compressed, it would be no different from having stopped time. The key would be to reach the level where one could move with full power as if time had stopped. The sound had already vanished. The two people continued to battle each other in a silent world where even time had been left behind. Dodge, being dodged, defend, being defended against, beat, being beaten, kicked, being kicked, shot, being shot. Absolute defense, defense penetration, absolute accuracy, absolute evasion, single attack, continuous attacks, chaotic attacks, damage increase, damage reduction. Divine magic, arcane magic, acceleration, deceleration, attack reflection, skill penetration, attack increase, defense increase, speed increase, attack decrease, defense decrease, speed decrease, buff, debuff, inflict stun, stun immunity. Every constant, PAS.civ, normal, major, and counter, reaction, skills that activated was invalidated, skills that penetrated were defended against, and skills that avoided were offset. Even so, they continued to make deadly attacks without being able to land a decisive blow. Ha! Rupaz twisted her body. With attack increase, defense penetration, and all possible skills, she prepared for a single strike. Compared to the ridiculous cannon-like attacks so far, this was an even more ridiculous cannon-like attack. In the end, the cannon-like aspect was no different. It merely increased in power. Ugh! ORM also turned his body, putting all his power in his right fist. This was probably a full-powered attack on PAR with, or even higher than, Rupaz's skill. It would likely devastate the environment, but that was unimportant right now. The important thing was now, this moment of the battle. Collision. Even time began to shudder. This was probably the most powerful attack released by two of the strongest in the world of this era. They collided with hesitation, undoubtedly shaking the entire world. At the same time, it released all the sounds and shockwaves that were contained in the compressed time. Distant forests shook violently, causing panic among the animals. The seas raged, while the living creatures all over the world felt vibrations in the air. The ground everywhere ruptured. Avalanches happened on snowy mountains, while countless rocky hills collapsed. The shockwaves caused windstorms. Typhoon-like winds ravaged the entire world. All the remaining golems were annihilated while protecting the hero and his companions. In a city that was shaking due to the earthquake, the vampires were agitated at the unknown cause. However, the girl who was their princess was unmoved. She sat gracefully on the throne, stirring the wine glass containing fresh blood. Surrounding her were the corpses of magical beasts, which were minions of the Isor lion sent for her head. How enviable! As if to announce that her rival was still alive and well, the world trembled in a wave of power. Although she was already certain, she could now feel the healthy state of her rival. At the same time, a surge of frustration came from her chest. Selfish jealousy burned in her heart as if she had been abandoned by the other person who was playing with someone else. Joy and jealousy, she was like a foolish girl remembering her first love. Pondering this, Bennett Nash glanced through the window. Who was fighting her beloved and hated rival? How exciting! In the wilderness, a single male muttered in a delightful voice. Surrounding him were the corpses of vampires. Vampires had a high level of immortality, yet these had been ravaged beyond their abilities to regenerate. The one responsible was the huge lion sitting on the throne in the center. I'm getting hard, are you trying to charm me? Ruppaz. His body was over 150 meters long, even bigger than Ares in his true form. His eyes were full of arrogance as if everyone else was merely prey. His muscular body had the flexibility of cats and the hardness of steel. His body hair was crimson red. The reddish-black, huge lion was currently drooling, desperately carving for the best prey in the world. The world shook. Feeling this waves of power was the ultimate seduction, stimulating his fighting spirit. However, the desired opponent was not here. Oh, what a slaughter it would be. This was frustrating enough to drive one crazy. Unable to sate his fighting spirit and beastly appetite, Leon the Lion King took pleasure in feeling the shockwaves of battle. This was no joke. SEI was S.H.I plus veering miserably from the shockwaves of the battle. It would be impossible to defeat these monsters. No, they were not monsters, but calamities. They were calamities in the shapes of people. Look, even the tiger had his ears frightfully lowered and his tail between his legs. The two of them, who had finished a collision somewhere else, landed on the ground and stood as if they had not moved before the battle started. Author's notes Migres, my golems, translators notes the text in the two colored images essentially say the two lines immediately above the images. Despite showing many other characters in the images, they aren't actually present in the scene. They show up later in the same volume, Volume 3, of the light novel. Footnotes Alcor is the fainter companion of Mizar, the two stars forming a naked eye double in the handle of the Big Dipper asterism in the constellation of Ursa Major. The name Alcor came from Arabic, meaning forgotten or neglected one. As mentioned before, the 7 heroes are named after stars in the Big Dipper. This nickname essentially places Ruppaz as a companion, or forgotten member, of the 7 heroes. ORM is the Old Norse word for snake, worm, or dragon. Explosion approves. Image from DeviantArt, a wild last boss appeared. Translator, Hand of Vecna Editor, 2 more free thoughts Iron Fist, a skill that increased attack power. Penetrate Weak Spot, a skill that penetrated defenses. Revenge, a skill that increased power according to damage received. Meteor Kick, a skill that removed flight status of its target and inflicted damage. S.H.I plus NE Blow, a skill with absolute accuracy. Flash, a skill with absolute evasion. Double Blow, a skill that attacked twice. Fourth Blow, a skill that attacked 4 times. X Counter, a skill that negated physical attacks and countered with double damage. Sonic Fist, a skill that increased its number of attacks according to CLA.S and level. Smash, a skill that always inflicted a critical hit. Armor Break, a skill that inflicted a debuff to reduce defenses. Power Break, a skill that inflicted a debuff to reduce attack power. Speed Break, a skill that inflicted a debuff to reduce speed. Buster Impact, an exceptionally high damage skill that could be used only once every 24 hours. A high-speed movement skill. And various buffs and debuffs from Divine Magic, Recovery Divine Magic, Defensive S.H.I plus ELDS, and more. All these were used without reservations. If it was written like this, it would not be meaningful. Was this just an enumeration of the settings? I would have thought so too. Could you believe it? This was just a small portion of the skills I used to fight the Demon King. Well, I knew he was strong. After all, he defeated the 7 heroes, actually only 6 since Bennett Nash did not predict I.P.8, who defeated me. More than anyone else, I was aware of his power, but now I finally felt it for real. Honestly, I wanted to apologize for calling him Demon King-san, lol. Demon King-san was really strong, so, lol, shouldn't be added. My HP was already reduced by. He should have lost a considerable amount of HP too, but since he was the official last boss, his HP would exceed 1 million. My prediction placed him at around 3 million to 6 million HP. I did not think his HP would reach 10 million though. Basically, what I wanted to say here was that the situation was rather bad. If the fight continued like this, I would lose. Although we seemed to be on par in battle, there was a difference in HP, so it would be impossible to win. In player versus boss situations, it would only considered equal when the player could. I could not catch up in terms of healing. Although Divine Magic was used for automatic healing, it would need some time for a full recovery. I should have brought a weapon at least. If I had a weapon, I could use Sword Master skills, so the situation would be somewhat better. Although I could create weapons with the materials from the surroundings, such dull weapons would be of little use. Anyway, he did not seem like an opponent that could be defeated with just anything. As expected of Alcor. Even after 200 years, you are still stronger than the hero Alioth. But are you holding back? Or maybe I'm not worthy of you fighting seriously. Your strength is not merely of this degree. The Overlord, who challenged the 7 heroes, countless veterans, and hordes of golems and magical beasts 200 years ago, should be stronger than this. The one I feared, Rappa's Maffel, should be more brilliant and strong enough to burn. I pondered the Demon King's words and made an idiotic sound. What? No, my strength was the same as Alioth. However, some skills could not be used in battle within the game. The skills had to be set for use beforehand, and then only those skills could be used. There was no limit now, so I should be stronger instead. My total ability value was indeed higher than the 7 heroes, but it was not that great a difference. I could not compete in the fields that were specialized by each of the 7 heroes. As expected, it was impossible to match the 7 heroes fighting as a team. If it was possible, I would not be a wild last boss, but the actual last boss instead. Is this really your limit? I don't understand what you mean. Impossible, what in the world? No, I see. Is that it? The G.O.Dis has the initiative. I didn't know why, but the Demon King was visibly sullen and clicked his tongue. Could it be that Rappa's was stronger and more dangerous before I possessed her? No. That kind of strength would not be possible by doping. Even if I played the game tens of times longer than I did, it would be impossible to reach that level of power. I see. It seemed I was too impatient. It's not time yet. You have been muttering to yourself for some time now. It seems you have reached a conclusion that I have not understood. The Demon King muttered to himself and apparently reached a conclusion. Could he be very lonely? Soliloquies were known as a sign of loneliness. After I pointed it out, he turned to me as if finally noticing me. No, now is not the time for us to fight. There is no way to go beyond the G.O.Dis scenario like this. The G.O.Dis scenario. Indeed, this world moves according to the G.O.Dis scenario. The demons are no exceptions, or rather, they are the clowns that direct the scenario to its climax. After all, the G.O.Dis created them for this purpose. Even though I did not defeat him, it seemed I was considered acceptable. Despite having not determined the victor, the Demon King still provided some information. Didn't he say that I should find out by using my full power? Well, since he was already talking, I should just quietly listen. Why do you think that the demons attack and kill the humanoids? Isn't it to expand their territory? Yes, of course, but that is only the apparent reason. The real reason is, they could not stop killing. It's like if you don't eat, you can't live. If you don't sleep, you won't be normal. These are instinctive desires. The demons are defective creatures that would disappear if they do not kill people. After disappearing, their fragments would be left behind in the world, becoming what you call mana. This was a setting that I did not know. Indeed, the game did not explain why mana existed in the world. I didn't think too much about it, simply assuming that it was a given for a fantasy setting. The fundamentals of arcane magic is to recycle their corpses. Without demons, it would be impossible for you and your kind to use such a convenient thing like arcane magic. Yet because of them, the feudal killings would continue on. The G.O.Dis created the demons for this reason and left the management responsibilities to me. Management? How are you different from them? I felt there was something strange in the Demon King's words. Whenever he mentioned the demons, he always used the word them without including himself. This seemed to imply that he himself was not a demon. I pondered this, and as I was about to ask a question, someone among the heroes' party interrupted. Please wait. This must be the elf Niaizen who summoned me. He shouted at the Demon King with a face full of frustrations. What was that about? It sounded like the G.O.Dis wanted the world to be in despair. The G.O.Dis, you are saying that Alovinus, the G.O.Dis of Compa.S.Zion, wish for Ma.S.Sakers. Indeed, weaklings. The G.O.Dis did not want the world to be saved. That was why the war happened 200 years ago. Consider it carefully. Isn't it strange? Isn't it unnatural? It was true that people were afraid of Rupa's Maffel back then, but there was no need to defeat her before we even fought. It should happen after her battle with the demons instead. The ideal scenario should be to let Rupas defeat me first, then take the opening to bring her down after that. Yet the 7 heroes rebelled and sealed Rupas away without waiting for the right time. Now, isn't that suspicious? Even the Wisdom King, Migraz, made such a short-sighted decision as if he never even considered the future. Even a child would know if that was a good or bad time to dispose of Rupas. Yet the 7 heroes stopped thinking and simply challenged her. Well, since Bennett Nash was already hostile to Rupas and was aiming for her neck, she would probably do something so silly. But excluding her, weren't the actions of the remaining 6 people too unnatural? I was speechless with regards to the Demon King's question. The elf Niaizen appeared likewise. N.O. Body could refute it. It was indeed very unnatural. I did not know how tyrannical Rupas was, but she was ultimately still an ally of the humanoids. According to the books, even though she had a reign of terror, her rule was by no means evil. Even if she was to be ousted sooner or later, it would be better to let her defeat the demons first. Or rather, there would be fewer sacrifices if they waited for her to weaken after defeating the Demon King. Instead, the heroes attacked Rupas while she was in perfect condition, losing many veterans in the battle between humanoids and then lamenting if they had made a mistake in the aftermath. What a stupid story. Alcor, you probably reached the truth earlier than anyone else. That's the reason you unified the world and sought to exterminate the demons, even though N.O. Body would really benefit from it. It's all to forcibly end the G.O.Dis scenario. But X-Gate. A gate, emitting golden light, suddenly appeared in the S.P.A.ce next to the Demon King. The surprise attack came so suddenly that even the Demon King could not react in time and was dramatically blown away. As if to follow up on the attack, a golem in a maid costume flew through the gate. Program selection. Zubinel Janubi. Libra blasted the Demon King who had been blown away. The light, wrapped in purple lightning, surged forth in a straight line into the ground, resulting in an explosion of flames. Libra came over to my side, grabbed my waist, and activated Skyjet. Hey, Libra. Master, I propose, withdrawing from the battlefield is the best option. Now is not the best time to fight the Demon King. No, wait a minute. We are having a very important, withdraw conversation. Ignoring my words, Libra flew off without permission. Was she really loyal to me? She even ignored my commands. Meanwhile, the Demon King, who was relatively unhurt, returned hurriedly, but Tanaka suddenly crashed into him from the side. Then, Tanaka made a U-turn and went through the X-gate. Hey, Dina. You even brought Tanaka along? Its level is low. What would you do if it was destroyed in one hit? Descend, Libra. The hero is still down there. No problem. I don't know why Master is so concerned with them, but the Demon King is obviously after Master. If we withdraw, he won't do anything to those rats. You heard our conversation? We should be beyond your range of detection. Dina-sama opened a small gate, so we have been eavesdropping on the entire conversation. Oh, so it was like that. That fellow, Dina, was eavesdropping all along. Since I couldn't win, she dashed in to help and then brilliantly escaped. She acted at that time probably because the Demon King was fully concentrating on our conversation and had lots of openings. If it was during the battle, she might hit me instead in the worst scenario. Even so, he was saying something fairly important. He was about to elaborate on some unknown settings or past events. Furthermore, it seemed the goals of my previous self was different from what I knew about her settings. If possible, I would like to listen to the end. Anyway, Alovenus, huh? If I thought about it, she was a mysterious existence to me. She was the G.O.Dis of Compa.S.Zion who created the world of X-Gate. In the online version, she was the incarnation of the administrators. Furthermore, she was probably responsible for bringing me here. In reality, my last memory over there was to answer yes to Alovenus' question. That could not have been unrelated. Yet despite being the G.O.Dis of Compa.S.Zion, she created demons. If the Demon King was telling the truth, she would have intentionally created the enemy of all humanoids. If this was a game, it could be explained away as a plot device, but reality itself was different. What were the merits of doing such a thing? She would not be a G.O.Dis of Compa.S.Zion, but an evil deity. Moreover, if Mana was the corpses of demons, it would mean that more than half of the humanoids were evolved from demons, elves, beastkins, dwarves, hobbits, and vampires. These 5 races had evolved from humans due to Mana. If this was true, Flugels would be an exception. This was because we were incompatible with Mana. In other words, Flugels originated from humans without any relation to Mana. The theory of being the descendants of angels just became more credible. Furthermore, the changes in wing colors were due to Mana. Wasn't this mutation into a magical beast? This implied that I, with my black wings, had evolved into a different race? When I visited Svalin where Flugels would usually avoid, I did not feel any resistance at all. In fact, it was rather comfortable. Could it be I, Ruppaz, was not a Flugel? Virgo, so it was you who did it. ORM got up from the ground and muttered in a bored voice. He was not talking to himself. He turned and walked towards the girl who was smiling slightly, Dina. Despite facing the wrath of the Demon King, she did not flinch. Speak. A barrier is in place here. That golem will not hear us. Of course, the hero is outside the barrier too. Hehe, as expected of your excellency. There is nothing that you overlooked. Get to the point. What was that supposed to be? Venus, no, Dina. Hearing ORM's words, Dina laughed lightly. She narrowed her eyes, pursed her lips, and said elusively. That was, of course, an act to gain trust. After all, there was a doll monitoring me. And so you made an unreserved attack. Oh, but an attack like that was nothing to your excellency. This is my trust in your excellency's abilities. What a smooth talker. ORM snorted and laughed. He faced Dina and asked in a serious tone, Alcor, Ruppaz Moffel has weakened. You know, right? Of course. I think this should not be your doing, right? There's no way I could pull that off. Only the omnipotent G.O.Dis could do that. Indeed. Dina laughed and came closer to ORM, whispering into his ear, I see. So there was this too. Then, I will start preparing for the attack. She would be stopping by for a while. I pray for your excellency's good luck in battles. What a strange thing to say. Who exactly are you praying to? Dina did not answer ORM's question. She merely said by him silently. At that moment, a gust of wind blew. After the wind subsided, all that was left behind were the dumbfounded hero and his companions. Author's notes, a completely irrelevant matter in the early stage of the plot, the 12 heavenly stars were named Royal Way 12 stars, but since it was not forceful enough, it was renamed as Tyrannical Way 12 stars. This was the history behind the name. It would be wonderful to name it Imperial Way 12 stars. I somewhat regretted not doing that. Translators notes this is in reference to the author's notes above. In Confucianism, the royal way is a form of governance based on righteousness and Compa.s.Zion. It is opposed by the tyrannical way, which uses military power and authority to oppress the common people. On an unrelated note, the imperial way could be a reference to the Imperial Way faction, which was a political faction in the Imperial J.A. Payne's army that sought to establish a totalitarian, expansionistic, military government. The author isn't particularly consistent in naming the group. They were referred to as 1-2, which Shuram translated as 12 heavenly stars. I will continue to use the term, 12 heavenly stars, for consistency's sake. Footnotes Flash Step uses exactly the same name as the skill in Bleach manga/anime. Ruppas has 335,000 HP in. After consuming the orc meat, her HP rose to 336,100 in. So 50,000 points of damage reduced her HP by 14.9%. Essentially, because the boss has so much HP, the player needs to be overwhelming in order to even the odds and equalize the situation. Evening Star is the name for the planet Venus as it appears visible to the naked eye in the evening. When it appears in the morning, it is called Morning Star or Dawn Star, which is the name of the other skill used by Dina in. Blutgong is the sword of Hema, also called Heim, which broke in his duel with Theodoric. In this novel, Blutgong is the city founded by Mizar, the Smith King. Like other cities such as Svalin and Leavitian, it is named after a weapon in Norse mythology. A wild last boss appeared.